San Diego Global Knowledge University.
Welcome everyone. In this class, we're going to talk about business models. We'll explore where they come from, using clear language and real-world examples to understand how a company creates, delivers, and captures value. We'll figure out who the customer is, what they care about, and how we turn that value into money that keeps coming in. We'll go on a journey, starting with classic definitions from people like Drucker, Magreta, and Osterwalder, all the way to the Canvas model with its 9 building blocks. And we'll finish by connecting the business model to the business plan, so you can actually make your ideas happen. By the end, you'll have a simple roadmap for your idea, your business model, and a plan of action you can actually measure. Get your notes ready, and let's begin. The topic of the business model has sparked a lot of talk ever since the phrase started getting popular in academic papers in the late 1990s, thanks to Zott, Amit and Massa. This growing interest led to a special issue of long-range planning in 2010. It brought together top experts in the field to answer questions about what a business model is and what it's for. A key point that came out was that a business model is more than just saying how value is made and captured. It's a model, and like many other kinds of models, it can look different and be used for many things. These uses include being a tool you can play with that can help professors or managers better understand how making value and getting value are connected. It can also be something you use to teach others about a business and its situation. The special issue and later works also brought up again the important question of how changing technology affects the choice of a business model. This was discussed by Chesbro in 2010 and by Gambardella and McGahan in the same year and in the model itself. It also showed a shift in focus from what's happening inside a company to what's happening outside its walls and beyond, and to the relationships between the company and its customers. Plus, it highlighted the role of the business model in showing how a company is run, covering not just what's inside and earlier in the value chain, but also everything all the way to the customer. We're sharing 5 contributions that really focus on not just what business models are, but also how they come about. This helps us better understand the extra value of using models in that setup. First, we'll talk about Casadesus, Massanel, and Heilbronn. They re-examine what the phrase business model as a model means and how this idea adds value to the old ways of thinking about strategy. They point out a big, often missed chance for profit called ambivalent value. This creates an important link between economic thinking and strategy, showing a side that traditional strategy analysis usually ignores. Next, we'll discuss Benoit Demille and Xavier Lecoq. They look at how managers build and rebuild the business models that guide their company decisions. Using a careful method called Actor Network Theory, ANT, they pay attention not just to what managers say, but also to the tools they create when making a new business model. This is a big help for strategy experts who want to do real-world studies on how strategy happens. Third, we have Tatiana Michalkina and Laur Cabantus. They use research on how things are grouped into categories to understand and explain how strategy ideas are formed and how they spread. They ask, how did Airbnb start and then become a famous platform business model and an example of the sharing economy, becoming a guide for other companies? Their analysis gives a good base for others to understand how new business models are born, how the media talks about them, and how other people can then use those ideas in new situations. Fourth, we have Ryan Rumble and Vincent Mangematin. They look at how thinking by comparing things, analogical thinking, versus thinking step-by-step, logical thinking, helps create new business models. They say that platform businesses with many different sides are much more complicated than old-fashioned product or custom work businesses, so companies are formed in a different way. They use QCA analysis, which is a way to compare things, to show how companies that choose to run multi-sided platforms follow different paths than those that run single-sided models. And, usually, though maybe surprisingly, the multi-sided platform companies avoid careful planning and rely a lot on thinking by comparing things. The results strongly suggest that old ways of strategic thinking and their tools aren't good enough to understand and help modern businesses. This is a gap that both academics and business people need to fill. Finally, we'll talk about Kostas Markidis. When he looks at how strategy and business models connect, he reminds us that new ideas need to show how they add value, instead of just repeating and rebranding old, well-known information. In this book, the contributions recognize this challenge. In the process of modeling, that is, what it means for business models to be designed and changed, Paulo Aversa, Stefan Heifliger, Alessandro Rossi, and Charles Baden-Fuller looked at the big question of how to best model a business. Building on Simon's 1962 work about how systems can be almost split apart, and looking at ideas about modularity, they explored what's needed to really change a business model. This means the user has to treat parts of the system like a black box, or hide them to avoid confusion. They saw similarities between this idea and talks about how technology can be modular. They also used Baldwin and Clark's 2000 ways of changing things to figure out what it means to change business models. Later, in 2015, Moritz Luke and Frederick Hecklin went deeper into why business models are framed the way they are, looking at what exactly makes up the model of a business model. They say that the basic ideas of business models should be seen as simple rules that help people think. Using Gestalt theory to explain the rules of modeling as giving shape based on rules, they broke down what it means and why it's important to use business models correctly. Their work provides a strong foundation for using business models and modeling with business models in research and thinking in strategy. Also, in 2015, Santi Furnari looked at another part of the challenge of modeling with business models, the cause and effect thinking behind it. He argues that thought maps are a helpful way to see the cause and effect connections that support business model thinking in the minds of managers or researchers. These maps show 4 important parts of their cause and effect structure: how complex they are, what they focus on, how things are grouped, and what they're like. Finally, Joanne Jinjiang, Yossi Lichtenstein, and Jonathan Gander also revisited the classic strategy question about the link between size and success, which Chandler pointed out, and explored it in the world of digital businesses. They found 4 important things that lead to successful growth: getting both paying and non-paying users by learning from how they use things and through network effects, using this to get more and more information in making and sharing things, using technology that works well together, and using resources wisely. While none of these things are new on their own, looking at them together shows how, where, and when they connect and build up. A business model is like a simple map of how a business works. It shows how a business offers its products or services to customers, how it reaches them, how it connects with them, and how it makes money. These are also called business designs or company designs. It's how a company explains how it plans to make money and profit. So, you need to think about how it picks its customers, how it makes its products different and special, how it creates value for its customers, how it gets and keeps its customers, how it uses advertising and distribution to reach the market, what its main tasks are, what its most important resources are, and finally, how it makes a profit. Next, we'll look at some definitions from famous authors, in order of when they were written, to get their ideas on what business models are. Peter Drucker, in 1954, was the first to talk about this topic, saying that a business model refers to the way the company conducts its business. He suggested a model that answers who the customer is, what they value, and what's the basic idea that explains how that value can be given to the customer at a fair cost. Erickson and Penker, in 2000, said that it's a simplified idea of how a company works. It gives a simple view of the business structure that helps with talking about things, making improvements or new ideas, and figuring out what the information systems that support the company need. Linder and Cantrell, 2000, from the consulting firm Accenture, define an operating business model as the core logic of the organization for creating value. A profit-oriented company's business model explains how it makes money. Amit and Zott, 2001, argue that a business model explains the content, structure, and governance of transactions designed to create value by taking advantage of business opportunities. Chesbrough and Rosenblum, 2001, offer a more detailed and practical definition by stating that the functions of a business model are to clearly state the value proposition, to find a market segment, to define the structure of the value chain, to estimate the cost structure and potential profits, to describe the company's place in the value network, and to come up with a competitive strategy. Magretta, 2002, defines the business model as stories that explain how the company works. Using Drucker as a reference, the author defines a good business model as one that answers the following questions. Who is the customer and what do they value? What is the underlying economic logic that explains how we can deliver that value to the customer at an appropriate cost? Schaefer, Smith, and Linder, 2005, looked at 12 definitions published between 1989 and 2002 and created an affinity diagram to find the 4 common categories in all definitions: strategic choices, value creation, value capture, and value network. Basically, a business model should include the strategic choices, often linked to a network of collaborating organizations that explain how value is created and captured. In this class, we'll specifically look at what Osterwalder, Pigneur, and Tucci said in 2005. They looked at different definitions and ended up saying that a business model describes the value a company offers to its different customers, the skills and partners needed to create, market, and deliver that value, and connects money to the goal of making profitable and lasting income. The tool is a canvas that has the 9 blocks the author thinks are most important for this task. It's worth remembering that these blocks are connected to the analysis and key questions we asked when we were first coming up with the idea and seeing if it was possible. 1. Customer segment. The questions are: who are we trying to reach? Which groups are we thinking about? Which ones are most important? 1. Value proposition. The questions are: what problems do we solve? What need do we meet? What benefits does it bring? 1. Channels. The questions are: through what channels or ways will you contact and serve your customers? A common story. Why are business models and business plans being talked about so much lately? Is a good definition of them so important for financial and competitive success? Here's a common story that happens to entrepreneurs, showing how important these things are. How to start a business. 1. Idea generation. It all starts with coming up with an idea. Many of us, at different times and stages of life, get great ideas that we think could become businesses. But usually, they just stay ideas that are never really thought about or put down on paper, even on a napkin, to make that idea a reality. Before starting to develop a business idea, the entrepreneur needs to ask themselves if it's a good idea. The idea has several parts, and we need to ask ourselves these key questions. What exactly are we going to sell? This might seem like a basic question, but you need to be very clear and specific with your answer. This product or service will need a customer, so the next question will be, who is going to buy it? This might also seem very logical, but it's important to know exactly who you're aiming for. Next, we have the value you offer to the customer. Why will they buy it? This is one of the main things to figure out. If I have a product that's already out there, why would people buy my product instead of a competitor's? What extra value do I offer that makes customers choose me? Finally, we ask a bit about our business model. How are we going to make money? This is a super important question to know if the business can actually make a profit. We need to ask ourselves these things to see if the idea we came up with can work, because it helps us understand it clearly. Here's a list of some of the most common business or revenue models. The shopkeeper model. This is the oldest and most traditional model. It involves having a commercial space or a sales point in a good spot where potential customers are, and through this, you offer and sell products or services from many different makers. Your income is directly tied to the customer. The advertising model. This is the simplest model of all. You pay to advertise a product or service in a place where lots of people will see it. The demand model. This is a plan where the maker decides to sell directly to the buyer. They set up their own way to get products to customers, making it easier for the customer to buy and saving them money. The bait and hook model. This is where you offer one product at a very low price, with the plan to charge higher prices for the replacement parts or related products or services. Think of it as giving away one product when someone buys another. The multi-level sales model. This is a business plan where people get more customers to join, building a network. The goal is for the new people to bring in money or commissions for the original people. The collective business model. These are companies with several locations. They have a main model that they copy at all the other locations, so they all work the same way, and customers feel comfortable at any branch. The franchise model. Here, a business owner has a brand, image, ways of making things, a patent, basically, things they own that are then given to others to use to sell things commercially, exactly as instructed, in exchange for a share of the business's sales. The assignment or licensing model. This is often used in businesses that involve special knowledge. The owner of the item or service gives someone else the right to use it, but not the ownership rights, in exchange for regular payments if it's a license, or a one-time payment if it's an assignment. The custom order model. This is all about serving the customer and meeting their specific needs. There are two main ways this can work. One is based on making many things, but each one is customized. The other is a custom model with small productions, but they are very special and exclusive. The business plan. The third step of how to start a business is the business plan. A business plan is a formal statement of business goals, written down in a document. It develops, organizes, and brings together the activities, business strategies, market analysis, and other studies needed for a business idea to become a successful company. It also includes how profitable the business will be, the company's organizational chart, its capital structure, financial evaluation, funding sources, the staff needed and how they'll be chosen, the company's philosophy, legal stuff, and its exit plan. A business plan usually has 9 chapters. 1. Executive summary. This describes the idea as clearly, convincingly, and briefly as possible, setting the stage for reviewing the full business plan. 2. The product or service. This describes what the product or service does, the benefits customers will get from it, and its features. It needs to show that the entrepreneur can include the customer's point of view in the business plan, adding value. 3. The team. This summarizes the founder's education and work experience. Venture capitalists only invest in new companies run by an excellent team. 4. Market and competition. This analyzes the market and its growth, as well as competitors. It defines the target market. 5. Marketing strategy. This covers market segmentation, analysis of the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion, channels, and distribution. 6. Business system and organization. This summarizes which parts of the value chain the new company is involved in and proposes the organizational structure and company values. 7. Implementation timeline. This describes the most important activities and steps for developing the business, giving investors a roadmap to monitor its progress. 8. Financial plan. This explains the timing and size of necessary funding rounds, as well as the business's development and potential scenarios. 9. Risks. This clearly identifies potential risks and the steps to take to increase the business's chances of success and build investor confidence. So, what now? By looking at things as a process, our analyses help us think about strategizing, modeling, and putting things into action. This brings business models closer to the main ideas of strategic management. But our studies also point out some other areas we need to work on. The first challenge is figuring out how much the 3-sided business models of marketplaces like Uber or multi-sided platforms like Google need a different set of skills and management abilities, both in how we think and how we act. 3 of our studies suggest that companies using these models face unusual challenges, whether it's in the reasons behind their thinking, how they are designed and used, or how they become famous. Companies that use these models need to be creative with technology. Successful platform models seem to use digital tech to deliver content that can be fully digital, like Google, or include strong creative elements, like in video games. They also use tech to change how prices work and how businesses get involved. The payment systems for most multi-sided platforms rely on computer algorithms, and the connection systems in the sharing economy also have algorithmic parts. This idea is strongly supported by leading economists like Rocher and Tirole, who explain that multi-sided business models follow different economic rules for pricing than traditional product companies. The second challenge is to think about what business model innovation means for both academic and professional strategists. The main focus of traditional concerns is shifting from how technology changes a company's cost structure, better production, better delivery, new ways to set up assets and outsource, to new ways of getting customers involved and getting them to pay. This is where the idea of business model as a model becomes super important, because it asks questions like, who is the customer? What value is created for that customer when they interact with the company? And how will that value be made into money, either directly or indirectly? This highlights new areas that include not just three-part business models, but also things like the sharing economy, which are hard to deal with using old strategy tools. These models demand that academics and managers realize that the same product can be delivered in very different ways, with very different results. So competition between companies is no longer just about better product offerings, but also about more effective business models. Lower quality, free offerings from multi-sided platform models like YouTube or ad-funded video games, and sharing economy offerings with different cost structures can be very competitive for certain people compared to higher quality offerings from more traditional players with product-based models. In other words, a company with a product-based business model that asks, who is the customer, might find that there isn't just one customer, but several, because a competing company that runs a multi-sided platform or a sharing economy model will attract other groups of customers and will be changing how entire industries work. For academics, this is a challenge. The companies being studied might not have changed their model at all. But if others have, then the industry and its environment have changed. And the old analytical tools, which measure the value of an asset, how competition happens, and how competitive advantage is created and spread, will need to be rethought and adjusted. This leads to a big topic in company strategy that's often missed. Business models aren't just one-to-one with companies. Many companies actually manage a bunch of different business models. For big, diverse companies, this often happens because they've expanded into new areas, using their skills in different ways for different types of customers. So, different parts of the company use shared abilities to sell products one way in one market and another way in a different market. For smaller companies, these different models often come from needing to make things work. There might not be enough demand for their main product, so the owner sells consulting time to use their extra skills. We don't know much about how good it is to manage these different models. And we don't know if companies that copy the same business model everywhere, like fast food places, with McDonald's as a good example, do better than companies that try to fit their model to each specific situation, which can cause problems with getting everyone on the same page. How copying, changing, and adjusting business models affects a company's success when they manage many models becomes a really important question to study. So, to wrap things up, basically, benchmarking is an ongoing way to learn from the best using facts and good ethics. Then, you take what you learn and make real changes. Here's how you can do it. 1. Figure out the most important process and how you'll measure it. 2. See where you're starting from. 3. Pick 2 or 3 examples to learn from and write down what they do. 4. Find out how far behind you are and why. 5. Put together a plan with goals, who's responsible, and a timeline, then check in regularly. Try to avoid 3 common mistakes. Industrial tourism, just looking around without a real goal, focusing only on numbers without understanding why, and copying and pasting without thinking if it fits your situation. If you do it right, benchmarking can really help your business model, make what you offer even better, and boost how much you get done with improvements you can actually measure.